My name is Ellie Carter. I am 29 years old, and last Saturday I watched my sister's wedding fall apart from 900 miles away. I was not invited, not even a text or a call. I found out the date through our cousin Brooke, who whispered it over the phone like it was classified information. And still, like some desperate outsider, I found myself watching the live stream in my tiny apartment in Seattle, wrapped in a hoodie, eating cereal straight from the box. As the ceremony began, I tried to focus on the beautiful floral arrangements, the glimmering lights, the soundtrack that someone definitely spent hours curating, but I could not ignore the ache in my chest. Natalie looked stunning. She always did. She was marrying Liam Walker, the man my parents called the catch of the decade heir to one of the largest family-run real estate firms in the state. And yet from the moment he appeared on screen, my stomach twisted. He looked smug. Not nervous, not overwhelmed, just smug. Like he had already won. Like this entire wedding was a press release. Every time he touched Natalie's back or kissed her cheek, I felt nauseated. Because I knew something she did not. A week earlier, Brooke had sent me a voice memo, a recorded phone call she accidentally overheard, between Liam and his mother Margaret. They talked about image control and keeping Natalie in line. Liam had laughed. His mother had said, "We do not need her opinion, just her signature." That sentence stuck with me like a splinter under my skin. Natalie had no idea. And even if she did, she would have ignored it. She always believed in fairy tales. She believed Liam loved her. She believed this day was the beginning of her forever. But from my couch in Seattle, I saw what she could not. I saw how she had been reduced to a pawn, a name on a contract, an accessory to a family empire, more concerned with appearances than with love. And I knew no matter how far I was, no matter how much she hated me, I could not let her walk into that marriage blind. Not again. Not like this. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The white marble courtyard shimmered beneath strings of imported crystal lights, and the guests, all immaculately dressed in navy blush and gold, stood in neat rows as the string quartet played a slowed-down instrumental of Can't Help Falling in Love. I watched from my laptop screen, full of elegant angles and filtered happiness. Natalie, in a lace-sleeved designer gown, beamed as if she were starring in a luxury perfume ad. And Liam, that smug bastard, wore confidence like it was custom-tailored. Not once did he look at her, the way someone should look at their bride. His eyes scanned the crowd, nodding to colleagues, acknowledging power brokers seated in the front row, like he was closing a deal instead of starting a life. Natalie could not see it, she never could. She was raised to crave validation, to equate smiles and surface-level praise with love. And Liam knew that. He weaponized it. Margaret, his mother, had planted the seeds early, introducing Natalie to their circle, molding her into someone more presentable, less opinionated. Natalie thought she was being welcomed into the family. What she was actually being handed was a script. From my screen, I saw a woman reciting lines she did not write. What haunted me, more than the ceremony's hollow beauty, was the reception lineup. There was a toast scheduled for Cassandra. That name made my skin crawl. She was Liam's longtime friend from Columbia Business School, but everyone with half a brain and a spine knew Cassandra was more than a friend. She had been at every company gala, every family fundraiser, and according to the voice memo Brooke intercepted, was referred to as Plan B by Margaret. Plan B. As if Natalie was a failing investment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something. But most of all, I wanted to protect my sister from the humiliation I saw brewing. The wedding was not just a celebration. It was a staged acquisition, and Natalie. She was the closing signature. I did not know what to do yet, but I knew this silence would make me complicit. I would not let her suffer alone, not when I had the truth. If you have ever watched someone you love walk straight into a trap while the world applauded you, understand this pain. Comment below if you have been there. Subscribe if you want more stories that speak truth in a world full of lies. I could not sleep that night. After watching the wedding stream until the final slow dance faded into blackout, I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, my thoughts spiraling. Natalie's radiant smile haunted me, not because it was fake, but because it was so real, so heartbreakingly genuine. She believed in everything that day stood for. She believed Liam loved her. She believed she was safe. But I had heard the truth with my own ears, that memo from Brooke, the cold, calculated conversation between Liam and Margaret about image control and ownership. I played it again at 2:17 a.m., needing to be sure I had not misheard. I had not. Margaret's voice, crisp, measured, with no room for emotion, said plainly, "She will sign. And once she does, everything folds back into our name. No mention of love, of building a life. Just consolidation." I stared at the ceiling, gripping my phone so tightly, my fingers ached. And then, like the universe mocking me, Brooke sent another message. Just a screenshot this time. A list of roles and slideshow contributors for the reception, Cassandra Winters, speech and tribute media. I blinked, reread it, then zoomed in. It was not possible. Or maybe it was. Natalie had told me once over coffee, back when we still spoke, that Cassandra was just a work friend of Liam's, someone he ran into at conferences. I had shrugged it off at the time, but now I knew better. I called Brooke. She picked up on the first ring, breathless like she had been waiting. "Ellie, I do not know what they are planning, but Cassandra's been at the venue all day," she said. "She has her own room and a stack of folders labeled Contingency Presentation." I felt my stomach drop. Contingency for what? Brooke hesitated. "Honestly, I think they're preparing for something huge, maybe if Natalie backs out. Or maybe they plan to humiliate her." Suddenly, the slick calm of the wedding turned sinister. It was no longer just about lies. It was about control, power, reputation. Natalie was not marrying into a family, she was being absorbed by a brand. And if she ever stepped out of line, they were ready with their Plan B bride waiting in the wings. I sat in silence for a few seconds before saying, "We need to stop them." Brooke agreed without hesitation. "I have the files, photos, emails, and that video Margaret's message to Cassandra got sent to me by mistake. I saved everything. It was not revenge I wanted. It was rescue. I did not care if Natalie hated me for it. I would rather lose her for trying to protect her than sit quietly while they tore her apart for show. Whatever it took, Natalie was not going down like this. Not on my watch." The next morning, I woke with one thought pulsing in my mind. They had planned everything, but they had not planned for me. The walk to my kitchen felt heavier than usual, like I was dragging my own guilt behind me. I had let too much slide for too long. I had swallowed too many insults, stayed quiet at too many dinners, let Natalie drift too far, all because I thought silence kept the peace. But peace built on fear is just a quiet kind of war. And now it was time to fight. Brooke called me at 8:00 a.m. sharp. "Ellie, I cannot stop thinking about that video. The one where Margaret tells Cassandra she might be needed sooner than expected. It gives me chills." I told her I had been thinking about it too, and I had a plan. We would not go to Natalie directly. She had already written me off as bitter and dramatic. But the public, the guests, the dozens of influencers, investors, and society vultures sitting at that reception waiting to be impressed. They were the perfect audience. Brooke and I decided to hijack the slideshow. Jessica, Natalie's maid of honor, and a quiet rebel in designer heels, had always liked me more than my sister knew. Brooke reached out to her privately and asked if she could access the media files for the reception. She could. "Liam had a flash drive labeled Approved Visuals," she said. "I can swap it, just tell me what to use." I spent the rest of the day compiling everything. Brooke's voice memos, the email from Margaret calling Natalie a necessary transition, photos of Liam and Cassandra taken just 3 weeks earlier in aspen arms, wrapped tight lips, too close, bodies too familiar. The crowning jewel, that mistakenly sent video of Margaret smiling into the camera, saying, "You know what to do, Cassandra. If things unravel, you'll be ready to stand beside my son. You always have been." My hands trembled as I clipped the footage together. It was not just evidence, it was proof that love had never lived in that house. We kept our plan quiet. Even my fingers hovered nervously over the keyboard, afraid the Walker family could somehow feel the shift in energy. Jessica confirmed the swap had been made late that night. "It's done," she texted. "Whatever happens next is in the hands of fate." But fate was not in charge anymore. We were. I booked a last-minute flight back home, heart racing the entire time. I did not know what Natalie would say if she saw me. I did not know if she would scream or cry or slap me across the face, but none of that mattered. She needed saving even if she did not know it. And for once, I would not watch from a distance. I would be there when it happened, when the fantasy shattered and the truth lit the room like fire. The morning of the reception, I sat 3 rows from the back right side, wearing a sleek black jumpsuit that blended into the shadows. No one recognized me, not the Walkers, not their staff, not even Natalie's wedding planner, who had seen me once years ago at a rehearsal dinner and barely acknowledged my existence then. That was exactly how I wanted it. I kept my head down and my phone tucked beneath the linen napkin on my lap, waiting for the right moment. The room buzzed with champagne gossip and flash photography. Everyone was celebrating, everyone but me. And somewhere behind one of the grand French doors, my sister was about to walk into a hurricane. The toasts began with standard speeches, laughter-laced, ego-stroking stories from Liam's groomsmen, and a painfully scripted nod to Natalie from one of Margaret's friends that sounded more like a business endorsement than a tribute. I watched Jessica, the only one who knew the truth, give a subtle nod toward the projection booth. Brooke had told me exactly what to expect. Once Liam finished his toast, the slideshow would autoplay. All we had to do was let it run. Liam stood, glass-raised, smug smile intact. To Natalie, he said, "My partner in love and in legacy. May we always build something greater than ourselves." Applause erupted, but I saw Jessica flinch. She knew what legacy meant in his world. It was never about love, it was about ownership. I held my breath as the lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. The first 2 images were harmless childhood photos of Natalie, clips of her classroom, a slow-motion video of her laughing in a sunflower field. I could feel the room settling into sentimentality. And then the first glitch, a jump cut. The sound dropped. A new slide appeared, Cassandra and Liam wrapped in a blanket by a fire pit time-stamped only weeks ago. A murmur rose. Another photo, another kiss. Then the video. Margaret's voice rang out like ice in a glass. "You know what to do, Cassandra. If she falters, you will be beside my son. You always have been." Silence snapped across the ballroom. Wine glasses stopped midair. A fork dropped and clattered against a plate. And in the center of it all, Natalie stood, frozen bouquet, trembling in her hand. Liam turned pale. Cassandra, seated far to the left, stood up too quickly, as if she was waiting for her cue. Gasps became whispers, and whispers erupted into shouting. Margaret moved first, storming toward the projection booth like she could rewind what the world had just seen. But it was too late. The truth was out. The slideshow ended with the final image, Natalie alone at her bachelorette party, smiling wide, completely unaware of the storm that had already begun. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just watched as the room burned, not with fire, but with fury. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I was not hiding anymore. Chaos erupted like thunder. For a moment, no one moved, frozen between disbelief and confusion. Then all at once the room fractured. A bridesmaid shrieked. Someone's champagne flute crashed to the floor. Guests began murmuring, louder phones rising to capture what felt like a live scandal unraveling before their eyes. I stayed seated, barely blinking, as if the slightest movement would snap the fragile string keeping me calm. Natalie just stood there, jaw-clenched, eyes wide, her fingers wrapped so tightly around the bouquet that the stems began to crack. Liam tried to speak, but all that came out was a stammered, "This was not supposed to." But everyone could see the truth. He looked guilty. Margaret stormed the stage, snatching the mic like she was salvaging a company earnings call, not her son's wedding. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a brittle smile. "This slideshow was tampered with by someone who clearly has an agenda." Her gaze swept the crowd, calculating, searching for someone to blame. She found me. Her expression faltered for half a second, just long enough for me to know she knew. but she could not out me without confirming the content. So she pivoted. "Cassandra," she hissed across the ballroom, "sit down." But Cassandra did not move. She stepped forward instead, eyes locked on Liam. "Tell them, Liam," she said softly, too softly. "Tell them the truth. Or I will." That was the moment everything truly fell apart. Liam turned to Natalie, and the words spilled out messy, incomplete, full of qualifiers. "It was before we were engaged. We were on a break. It meant nothing." Natalie did not respond. She simply placed her bouquet on the edge of the sweetheart table, like it was something fragile she no longer wanted to carry. Then she walked straight down the center aisle, through gasps and camera flashes, through the legacy her in-laws tried to trap her in, through the fantasy she had clung to like a lifeline. I followed her. Brooke met us by the exit, eyes red. She handed Natalie her phone, where messages from friends and colleagues were already pouring in. Sympathy, outrage, support. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. Natalie looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You did this?" she asked, not with anger, but with something else. Something almost like gratitude. I nodded. "You had to know." She did not say anything more. She just leaned into me, her shoulders finally collapsing as she whispered, "Thank you." The Walker family tried to contain the fire, spinning a narrative about tech sabotage and defamation, but it was too late. Videos leaked. The truth went viral within hours. A wedding meant to secure a business merger had become a global scandal. And Natalie, once the silent bride, had suddenly become a symbol for every woman who ever trusted the wrong man and nearly lost herself in the process. Justice had not just knocked, it had kicked down the door. By sunrise, the wedding venue had turned into a ghost town. The morning news buzzed with headlines like "Groom exposed at altar" and "High society scandal unfolds at Walker wedding." Every outlet from Page 6 to local stations dissected the footage, speculating who leaked it, how long the affair had gone on, and whether Natalie knew. She had spent the night at Brooke's apartment, refusing to answer calls from Liam, Margaret, or anyone bearing the Walker name. I stayed on the couch awake the whole night, just in case she needed to talk. She did not. But sometime around 5:30 a.m., she handed me her phone and said, "I want to post something. I want to say it myself." She wrote a statement. It was not angry or accusatory. It was raw, direct, and impossibly dignified. I was in love. I was misled. I am choosing to walk away, not in silence, but in strength. She hit post before anyone could talk her out of it. By noon, it had been shared over 120,000 times. Women commented in droves, thanking her for her courage, telling their own stories, offering support, and most importantly, believing her. But Liam and Margaret were not ready to surrender. They sent lawyers to Natalie's apartment with non-disclosure agreements and a settlement offer dressed up like an apology. "Take this," they said, "and move on with dignity." I watched Natalie skim the contract, then tear it in half without a second thought. She did not need hush money. She needed to be heard. That same week, we helped her file a formal complaint against Walker Group for misrepresentation and emotional damages. It was not about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no other woman got steamrolled in the name of image and inheritance. She stayed in town for a few days, mostly out of necessity, but I saw something change in her. She stopped flinching every time her phone buzzed. She started speaking about what happened with clarity instead of confusion. They built their lives on silencing women, she said. But not anymore. And when she asked me if the spare room in my apartment back in Seattle was still available, I said yes without hesitation. Natalie moved in with me a week later, suitcase in one hand, the remnants of her old life in the other. She donated the dress. She sold the ring. She changed her number. And slowly, the Natalie I remembered from years ago, the bold one, the funny one, the one who danced barefoot in the kitchen at 2 a.m., started to return. We began brainstorming ways to use what happened, not for sympathy, but for change. By the end of the month, we had filed paperwork to create a nonprofit that would help women recognize coercive power structures in relationships, especially those masked by wealth. Natalie named it Clear Eyes. Because once you see the truth, You cannot go back to pretending. And neither of us ever would. Clear Eyes launched quietly, but quickly caught fire. Within 3 weeks of going public, we had over 70,000 followers across platforms and more than 100 emails from women sharing eerily similar stories of manipulation, cloaked in luxury of families who traded daughters for alliances of wedding rings used as shackles. What had happened to Natalie was not an isolated betrayal. It was a blueprint used by powerful families who valued legacy over love. Each message we received reaffirmed our mission. We were not just telling Natalie's story, we were giving voice to a silent epidemic. And for once, Natalie was not just surviving the narrative. She was leading it. But then, just as the dust began to settle, the walkers struck back. A glossy press release hit the media circuits, claiming Natalie had fabricated the entire ordeal as a publicity stunt. Disgruntled ex-fiancé weaponizes misinformation in social smear campaign, the headline read. Margaret's fingerprints were all over it, carefully worded denials, selective facts, a formal accusation of slander. And buried in the fine print, a lawsuit. They were suing Natalie for defamation and damages to the Walker Group brand. Natalie's hands trembled when she read the documents, but her eyes stayed clear. They want me scared, she said. They want me silent. But I will not give them that. We met with an attorney the next day, a firebrand named Melissa Hart, who had taken down corporations twice the size of Walker Group. They made a mistake, Melissa told us. By dragging this into court, they opened the door for discovery. Every email, every memo, every piece of manipulation, they are now fair game. What followed was brutal but necessary. Months of depositions, document requests, and late-night strategy calls. Natalie had to relive every painful moment, every red flag she once ignored. But she did not flinch. Neither did I. We were no longer on the defensive. We were building a case not just for her, but for every woman who had been stripped of her voice and made to smile through betrayal. Then came the tipping point. Brooke found a deleted server folder from her former temp job at the Walker Group's PR firm. It contained internal strategy memos and planning documents, ones that detailed how Cassandra was to be positioned as fallback fiancé if Natalie ever stepped out of line. It included timeline speech drafts, even a proposed date for a second engagement announcement if the first wedding failed. We submitted the entire folder into evidence. When their legal team saw it, settlement talks began almost immediately. Natalie refused the money. Instead, she negotiated a public admission of wrongdoing and the release of several non-disclosure agreements from other women tied to the Walker Group. She did not want revenge. She wanted exposure and justice, and she got it. But more importantly, she reclaimed herself out loud on her terms in front of the very people who once tried to silence her. What they never understood is that a woman betrayed is dangerous, but a woman who stands anyway is unstoppable. The day the Walker Group issued their public statement was overcast and still. Natalie and I sat together in my apartment, the same couch where she had collapsed just months earlier after walking out of that sham wedding. Only this time, she was not broken. She was steady, poised, powerful. We watched the press conference stream live a slick suit of a spokesperson reading a carefully worded acknowledgement of internal ethical oversights and procedural misconduct related to the Walker Group's handling of employee relationships and public image. They never said Natalie's name, but they did not have to. The world knew, and more importantly, so did the other women who had once been silenced. Almost immediately, our inbox exploded. Dozens of former staffers, fiancés, and even one former assistant to Margaret herself began sending their stories. Every email opened a new door, patterns of behavior tactics, repeated names of enablers who had played supporting roles in dozens of betrayals. Some messages were heartbreaking, some were rage-filled, all were brave. Clear Eyes expanded rapidly. We brought on 2 trauma therapists, a legal advisor, and a media strategist. What had started as Natalie's personal redemption had grown into a national platform for women who had been puppeted, packaged, and discarded by the powerful. And Natalie was the face of it. But this was not about becoming a martyr or a symbol. She did not crave recognition. She wanted results. With each story published, each anonymous testimony shared, we chipped away at a system that relied on silence. And slowly, it began to crack. Investors pulled out of Walker subsidiaries. Margaret was quietly removed from several boards. Cassandra attempted her own damage control interview and was promptly torn apart by viewers who had seen through the performative regret. Then the most unexpected thing happened. Natalie was offered a book deal. At first, she resisted. "I am not a writer," she said. "I am just a woman who got hurt and decided not to stay quiet." But I reminded her that sometimes the best books come from the loudest wounds. She accepted. Not for fame. For freedom. She wrote it all. The grooming, the betrayal, the slideshow, the choice to walk away from a life that was polished but poisonous. Her final chapter was called "The Sentence That Saved Me," a nod to the moment everything broke open when the truth froze a ballroom and finally set her free. We closed that chapter together with a quiet dinner. No cameras, no statements, just pasta red wine and soft music playing in the background. Natalie looked at me and said, "You know, I thought losing everything would kill me, but it gave me back the one thing I forgot I had myself." And that is what this story is really about. Not revenge, not scandal, not even justice. It is about remembering who you are when the world tries to rewrite your worth. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you angry, share it. Subscribe for more stories that expose betrayal, celebrate truth, and remind us all that healing begins when the silence ends.